The Comedy of Errors ranks low in the world of Shakespearean opinions. It's not often assigned in school, very few film adaptations have been made. It's seen as an early play, and therefore easily relegated to the workings of an ambitious young playwright who has not yet hit his full literary stride. And yet, the play has become an icon of literature and pop culture. Out of the 1,100 Shakespearean posters compiled in Mirach Illick and Stephen Heller's Presenting Shakespeare, Comedy of Errors is the only named work on either the front or back cover. It updated and improved the ancient comedic art of mistaken identity. It's the only Shakespeare play whose title still serves as an expression. And while As You Like It has better comedy, Lear better tragedy, The Tempest a better shipwreck, Twelfth Night better twins, and Midsummer better Greeks, all of these elements first took root in the Comedy of Errors. The parts here are incredible. You owe it to yourself to be your own judge of their sum. And this video's gonna help you make sense of this nonsensical adventure. One of the best areas to start when talking about the Comedy of Errors is the ancient connections that Shakespeare's drawing from. Roman playwrights, especially Plautus, provided Shakespeare with the foundations of his plot, especially the mistaken twins device. However, as is the case with most of his plays, Shakespeare's changes to the source material drastically elevates the overall story. One of the big changes Shakespeare makes to this play is the setting. He takes the original setting and changes it to Ephesus, a biblical reference that plays into the audience Shakespeare's writing for. Shakespeare's audience would have connected Ephesus with Ephesians, and they would have connected Ephesians with Paul's instructions in the book of Ephesians, which are mostly focused on marriage and servitude, two major themes in the play. Keeping in line with the new setting, Christian themes run throughout the play, such as baptism, salvation, and marital fidelity. However, that doesn't mean the play is totally divorced from its original ancient inspirations. In many ways, this is the most ancient of Shakespeare's plays. While we mentioned the main plot comes from the Romans, there's actually a large Greek idea at play in here too. Many scholars have pointed out that the Comedy of Errors is Shakespeare's only play that keeps within the classical unities of time, place, and action. In case you're wondering what those are like I was when I first read that, the Encyclopedia Britannica tells us the three principles derived by French classicists from Aristotle's Poetics. They require a play to have a single action represented as occurring in a single place and within the course of a day. These principles were called, respectively, unity of action, unity of place, and unity of time. So this goes all the way back to Aristotle, but this is the only one of Shakespeare's plays that has that one action, no side plots, all taking place in the same location and all happening more or less in a single day. So that's a pretty cool, unique thing about this particular play. Another major concept to be aware of when you're reading the Comedy of Errors is the concept of farce. And once you know what farce is, we can pay attention to how Shakespeare subverts it. A farce is a play full of slapstick, over-the-top characterization, and ridiculous situations. These are usually thought of as a lowbrow entertainment, and many consider this play to be Shakespeare's quintessential farce. So why is that? Well, the introduction to the Folger Library edition of the text helpfully illustrates that the notion of a farce carries with it a helpful cooking analogy in the verb to farce, which means to stuff a bird for roasting. Before we get very far into the Comedy of Errors, we find it as full of laughable complications as any bird was ever full of stuffing. A large part of this comedic overstuff comes from the relationship of the characters, a situation so ludicrous that I need to turn to a helpful graph to help explain it. As you can see here, we have a set of twins who have been separated, who are also served by another set of twins. Oh, and both sets of twins have the same name as their other twin. So committing this graph to your notes might be the most helpful thing you can do when approaching this play for the first time, or second or third time for that matter. But it's also worth noting that for all the farcing going on in this play, there's also moments when the tomfoolery falls away, and Shakespeare hits us with some of those lines that make Shakespeare Shakespeare. Look for those moments when you read, especially from Adriana. One final theme that I suggest you look for in this play is the power of storytelling as well as the limitations of storytelling. The play starts off with Aegon on death row, but the story he tells the Duke buys him some mercy, but only for a day. The twins, both sets, find themselves in ridiculous situations of mistaken identity, and neither of them can ever really effectively or reliably talk their way out of this mistaken identity. Storytelling is powerful, obviously Shakespeare knows that, but Shakespeare never forgets that he's operating in a visual medium, the theater. Only the physical reunification of siblings, children, parents, and spouses can ensure that this potential tragedy of errors ends comedically. One final thing I like to do when introducing a Shakespeare play is give it a difficulty score and a rating. This is totally just my opinion, so take it for what you will. I give this one 6 out of 10 in terms of difficulty. It's not poetically dense at all. Like, most of the language isn't very difficult, but the plot is incredibly confusing. However, this confusing plot really is what makes the play so fun. So as a reader or viewer, I think it's better to just embrace this crazy plot and let it like carry you through the play rather than trying to swim upstream against it the whole time. Also, be sure to keep track of who's on stage when. That'll make things way more easy for you, especially if you're reading it and you don't get the benefit of seeing different actors. Although if the costume department is doing their job well, it might be hard to tell who's who even when you do see different actors because they're supposed to be twins, right? The other thing that makes this play not all that difficult is that it's so short. It's Shakespeare's shortest play, so there's a lot packed into it, but it's only one storyline and it's pretty short, so it's really not a very difficult read. In terms of rating, I give it 8 out of 10. I don't think it's one of Shakespeare's greatest works, but I do think it is a great work, and it's so different from a lot of his other material. And as I talked about in the introduction, it really lays the foundation for so many other plays that it's just really fun to read, especially if you're familiar with some of Shakespeare's other plays. But even if you're not, it's just a crazy farce, and especially if you get the chance to go see it, definitely go see it. It's a really fun one to watch. But even just reading it, there's a lot of humor there. I think you'll find it very clever. So 8 out of 10 rating. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions about this play or you want to suggest what play I tackle next, please leave them in the comments and I'll be sure to get back to them. Thank you again, and happy reading.